good morning, good afternoon, good evening, yWhales. Again, there's just so much going on in the world right now. Bitcoin is, we're at around 22K, and no, it's not 2019 or 2020. It's 2022, and the market's in a little bit of a kind of a kerfuffle, I'd say. Quite simply, there's a lot going on, external pressure with inflation and whatnot, and so really just kind of giving an overall market conditions, as I usually do, kind of at the start of these podcasts to help time them for where things are, because unfortunately it's relevant. The projects that we interview, like POKT Network, we're about to talk about today, again, I've seen amazing work by so many teams in and around the Web3 space, and we continue to see them work and evolve. Even when prices are down, that's actually where they seem to bury their head the most and just put out the best work product possible. So with me today, I've got Michael, and so instead of me kind of chattering on, I'd love to kind of jump over to Michael and with Pocket. And Michael, really, let's before we jump into what you're working on today, what was your first exposure into cryptocurrencies, blockchain, and that kind of got you thinking like, holy crap, there's something here that we need to spend some more time on?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jay. Really excited to be chatting with you. Yeah, my first exposure to really Bitcoin, because it was only Bitcoin back in the day, was in 2013, and I had read a Wired article about Bitcoin, and I think because of my background, I was just immediately interested into why Bitcoin should exist in the first place, and I say that because I was born in the Caribbean in the Dominican Republic and moved to the U.S. really early on. I was 2 years old, and uh, I've used Western Union enough times to feel the pain of trying to send money to your family. And outside of being used to digital worlds, playing video games, growing up, and this sort of thing, I think in 2011 and 2012, I also had a pretty important experience that working at a credit union or a couple credit unions selling loans. And you kind of see how difficult the financial system can be for people in some cases when you're looking at thousands of credit reports, kind of working through some things. You see people, just kind of stuck in a loop. And I think those two things really kind of prepared me for Bitcoin without realizing it. And reading that article, ending up on the subreddit, going through the Bitcoin talk forums, reading the white paper, I immediately just got it. I got so excited about it. I started writing blog posts about it. I think there's a Medium article from 2014 about me saying how Bitcoin is going to change the world. So, just immediately just got super excited about it. And from there, it's really been heads deep since then.
What was the first, like, because you're a mature entrepreneur at this point. So what was the first kind of concept that you came up with, and whether you executed on it or not? I mean, that's always the funny thing for me to hear about. People are like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make a wallet.
Oh man, the first thing I did was I started driving around to banks, thinking I could build a remittance company, and I'm like, hey, this was in 2014 actually. I'm like, hey, there's this thing called Bitcoin. I want to open a bank account for this business, and they're just like, what? No, this sounds illegal. Leave me alone. So I probably banged my head against that for a few months before kind of going back to the drawing board. At the time, I was also really deep into iOS development. I was just picking that up, and ended up diverting. Outside of just buying Bitcoin, ended up just spending about 3-4 years just fully focused on iOS development until started Pocket in late 2016.
And just to be clear, if you drove around to the banks today and say you'd like to start a Bitcoin business, they'll say the exact same thing. So
Yeah.
nothing's really changed. They still hate the thought of alternative money.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that was the first thing. That took me back. No one's ever asked that before, and
Well, good. See,
yeah.
that's what we do. We ask you some of the more interesting things and bring back some memories. So now again, it's and back then, I think for anyone that's kind of maybe just getting into cryptocurrencies or maybe entered in the last 24ish months, this is a very mature industry compared to where it was back in even 2015,
Oh
where it
man, yeah.
matured, and we kind of had the first major bull rush prior to the crash in the winter. I mean, that was considered like it's mainstream now. And I think that we're sitting right here on the opposite side of the next of the second crash, major crash, and people are going, oh, well, that was a fun experiment and it's over. And I really want to just say, and again, this is my personal opinion, that's a sign of maturity. Like, we have to have these bubbles. We have to be able to push the edge of these technologies. And I don't even believe so much that what we're looking at today is representative of the cryptocurrency market or technologies. We're mainly dealing with a lot of inflation and global issues. And I don't think that Terra helped anyone by having a crash prior to the crash. So it was really kind of like a double-edged sword where we got nailed, once, and then immediately kind of leveled out and just got nailed again. So it's like getting hit with the big wave and then the tsunami right after it. It's kind of, you're already off your feet. So here we are. But again, I don't say that from a bad perspective. It's just the reality of where we are, and entrepreneurs like yourself, Michael, are clearly dealing with that. Let's pivot over and talk about everything that you've built around POKT Network, because to me, this is one of the core features that Web3 needs to reach mainstream adoption. We have to make it easier than the way it is today, and there's got to be resources for companies like what yWhales represents to manage this. So talk to us a little bit about give us that elevator pitch of POKT.
Yeah, so Pocket exists because we started playing around with Ethereum. My co-founders and I had a previous startup in late 2016, started writing smart contracts and used a centralized infrastructure service. And and the service was Infura back in 2016, 2017, and they're still around today, one of the largest ones, really providing a good service to people today. And as 2017 rolled along, we saw how important Infura was to the Ethereum ecosystem. And to be clear, Infura is a developer tool. Basically, it's a quick start API that lets you connect your app to the Ethereum blockchain. But we saw how important Infura was to the Ethereum ecosystem, and how much Ethereum really relied at the time on Infura. Use every ICO, every CryptoKitties. At the time it was Ether Delta, if you remember that. But everything was using Infura, and kind of our core thought behind this was, look, we have these incredible decentralized blockchains with Bitcoin and Ethereum. But we're going to continue to see kind of bottlenecks up the stack. And what I mean by that is, if we're part of building this new kind of internet, right, where from when we went to we had, everyone was extremely optimistic. Web2 made a lot more people pretty cynical about things, and now you see people a lot more optimistic about things in Web3. If we're going to kind of rebuild this kind of the right way, there's going to be other important bottlenecks that need to be taken care of. And this is all kind of under the hood stuff, from storage to node infrastructure to VPNs to DNS. And we kind of saw node infrastructure as kind of a key piece to this puzzle to kind of build a truly censorship resistant and decentralized internet. And no matter where you are in the stack, whether you're Uniswap or ENS or HNS, at some point, everyone needs to touch a full node, whether it's getting a balance from your MetaMask wallet, submitting a transaction on Uniswap, and even exchanges that are sending transactions, right? At some point, you always need to touch a full node. So we thought this was a pretty important piece to tackle. And we had seen lots of posts back in the day from the Bitcoin Talk forums or the ETH research forums about, hey, we need to figure out how to incentivize full nodes because that's where we get all this data from. The challenge at the time, though, was that everyone was kind of thinking about it from a Bitcoin point of view or an Ethereum specific point of view, and really, the core thesis is that we think there'll be tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of blockchains, rollups, L2s, you name it, in the future. So we kind of took it from a first principles thinking of, okay, there's going to be tons of blockchains. How do we design a system to kind of support this kind of full node infrastructure? So really, with all that said, you can think of POKT as a very simple middleware protocol that sits in between a DApp and a full node, and provides really data, specific data, what we call RPC data, at scale, which is really what makes the bulk of every DApp that we use today. and Pocket is a truly decentralized and permissionless solution to kind of providing this kind of solving this bottleneck related to the kind of full node API infrastructure layer.
Yeah, and so I always like to make sure that everyone listening really understands what kind of from a higher level perspective what you're looking at. So the DApps, when they need to kind of grab pricing, they need to understand what's liquidity look like. They can go to the main node. They can obviously go over there, but if Ethereum is running slow, if any of the L2s are having issues, like you, let's be clear, blockchain is not fast yet. And so what you're doing with Pocket is you're sitting in there and just replicating the data, just essentially mirroring it, but giving a higher bandwidth availability for the DApps to at least see what's going on. They're still obviously doing the reading and writing on the actual L1, L2, wherever it is. But you're just providing read access to help speed up that visual process.
Yeah, read write access. So when you load a web page, right? If
Okay.
you load, Uniswap or pick your DApp, right? You'll see how long it takes for that data to load, right? It might take half a second, it might take 200 milliseconds, it might take 3 seconds, right? Pocket exists to serve that information as quickly, as scalably, and as reliably as possible.
Now, obviously, with Pocket, and you guys are adding in quite a bit of features here. You can grab multiple chains data.
Yeah. So Pocket, you can actually think of as kind of like a Uniswap for node infrastructure. So what that means is it's anyone can add their blockchain to Pocket. So if you want to spin up J chain as an example, and you have a block explorer, a wallet, whatever it might be, by sending that traffic through Pocket, you will incentivize people to spin up J chain nodes to provide that data to those front ends effectively. And in a world where we're increasingly multi-chain, where we have bridges and all these different multi-chain dApps, having one interface to access all this information is increasingly important.
Yeah, and I think that's the point that really we're watching, and it's almost scary how much Web3 is mirroring Web1. Because in the old days, and you've been around a while, so you understand the coding side of this. In the early days of Web1, when you started a website, you couldn't have multiple servers data on your website. So if you wanted to display pictures, you actually had to download them from somewhere else or create them yourselves and upload them because a browser could only manage a single connection at a time. And so, where we think about it right now, you can go onto, a single website and it's grabbing hundreds of servers. It's grabbing all sorts of cookies and everything else from all over the place. And we think of that as that's just the way things are. But in Web3, which is again very similar to early Web1, are you on Ethereum? Are you on Solana? And we don't want to talk about anything else from that perspective. They're not there. So you guys are actually solving a huge problem. What's the response been from the dev community? Are they responsive and kind of adapting with you, or is there any pushback?
Yeah, no, people developers have definitely been excited in using Pocket, particularly over the last 10 to 12 months or so. As we've started to see, for example, subnets on Avalanche. We're starting to see supernets on Polygon, Cosmos chains, parachains, ETH2 shards, near shards, even eventually Celestia rollups and every other layer two out there. There's an increasing need for people to offload this infrastructure. Teams want to be as focused as possible, and it's very similar to a traditional startup offloading their payment processing to Stripe, right? In Pocket, you can think of it as instead of that core team running all these full nodes, they offload it to a service like Pocket. And when you are in a environment where, as a centralized company, you kind of have to justify the costs and the effort needed to spin up a new chain, Pocket removes that completely. As long as there is a market for requests, there will be a set of nodes willing to serve that information within the network. So, we actually have a queue now of more than what the team can handle in terms of adding new chains. So we're, coming up with creative ways to kind of scale this through the community, as opposed to hiring a team of 150 DevOps people. But generally, the response has been fantastic, particularly because Pocket is just as fast, if not faster, in some respects when it comes to this latency side of things, and also reliable because we've got dozens, if not over 100 different types of setups across 30 countries. People running in the cloud, bare metal, data centers, even in their own homes, right? So if Amazon Web Services East goes down, Pocket keeps operating like normal operating procedure. So.
Well, as long as I can push you a little bit on the nitty gritty on the tech side, talk to us about kind of how your nodes operate. Like, are they obviously most likely proof of stake, those type of things. But what's the how does the token integrate with the nodes and as well as what how do you monetizing data in and out?
Yeah, so I like to use the analogy of kind of video game design. Actually, so you have sources and sinks. In our case, the source is each request that an end user makes through the network. So that could be, a request for your balance on your MetaMask wallet, as an example, right? And every time someone creates a request, that creates the ability for a node within our network to create Pocket for that work that they did, right? So that's really the only source that we have in the network today, and that's divided amongst a couple parties. But at a high level, every time a request comes through the network, that gives the ability for a node to actually create POKT, which is the native token of the Pocket blockchain. And in terms of sinks, it's a two-sided marketplace. So you have two people that want to stake Pocket for two different reasons. You have nodes that want to stake Pocket to have the right to do work. That acts as collateral. So in case they lie, cheat, do something bad within the network, they automatically get slashed and get their money deleted, right? And on the application side, they actually stake POKT for a very different reason. They do it for the service, for the reliable and fast infrastructure service for their DApps. So you've got this environment where you've got nodes and apps staking POKT and kind of creating, let's call it, those rewards, or depending on how you count it, kind of revenue for the nodes. And in the end, you've got to cut this balance of kind of POKT taken out of circulation and nodes creating POKT. And there's some burning mechanisms there contemplated for later, but effectively, it's a staking, minting, and burning system.
So, talk about a little bit about the tokenomics. So, is there a cap? Is there a I think right now you're a little bit over $1 billion. Looks like on chain. So, what's the short, medium, and kind of long term? I forget price. I'd never talk about price, but kind of how do you see this evolving, especially when you're talking about adding a burning mechanism, because that changes a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I like to. We use three different kind of phases for the protocol. One is a bootstrap phase, one is a growth phase, and the other one is the maturity phase, right? And if you think about it, kind of in traditional startups, it's a bit kind of like a J curve, where you put a lot of investment and eventually you kind of reach profitability, right? So we've kind of bootstrapped this network through heavy incentives for nodes, which has allowed us to get to kind of the quality of service that we have today. Over time, we've reduced those kind of incentives, if you will, to kind of bring them in line to something a little bit more reasonable. And as we get more mature, meaning let's say app staking or apps paying for Pocket starts to slow down. At that point, we'll start to introduce kind of the app burning, which one thing I didn't mention is that Pocket is an infinitely inflationary token. So at maturity, what you'll have apps staking Pocket. They'll effectively get burned as they use the service, and that is roughly equivalent, or will be roughly equivalent, to the amount of Pocket that nodes are minting for providing that service. So effectively, what you have is a really efficient value transfer mechanism, because traditionally what you'll see is people sending fees over L1s or in state channels. And if you're kind of in what we call incurring the cost of coordination, meaning if I send you ETH right now, all of the miners need to spend a bunch of electricity to kind of mine that block, right, or to have the right to produce a block, right? And in our case, if you think about just the energy of just staking once and then kind of topping up that stake, it's much less, significantly less, right? And you can kind of think of it like Bitcoin mining, where you've had situations in, for example, previous bear markets where the price reached a point to where it was no longer profitable to reach or to mine Bitcoin, right? Pocket has a very similar dynamic, right? Where as long as the bandwidth and electricity and the server costs, as long as they're earning enough POKT to kind of cover those costs, then you're effectively a profitable business. And that's kind of how we stay sustainable, particularly through periods like this.
Listen, and it's I'm sure it's a lot of fun during periods like this. So let's just for a quick second. Again, you very clearly understand blockchain architecture and a lot going on, and you're tied in with a number of L1s, L2s, and potentially even some level zeros. What are you seeing in the overall ecosystem out there? I mean, I believe, and kind of being chain agnostic. There's a lot going on. There's positives and negatives to each chain and whatnot. But kind of where are you seeing the innovation in the industry? Bitcoin's Bitcoin. Proof of work it's going to be proof of work forever. Ethereum's making the switch from proof of work to proof of stake. I can personally say with zero experience or knowledge, I think that's going to be a very much larger challenge than I think most people are letting on. But talked about I'd love to hear your opinions of where things are headed.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear we're going towards a very multi-chain world. I think we're starting to see stronger incentives for developer tooling. I think people are starting to see the importance of this sort of thing. I've seen several projects now that are really focused on and unique, really focused on kind of incentivizing updating GitHub repos as an example, and this sort of thing. But more broadly, I think anything that we're going to see really big success in things that are really good at abstracting kind of the underlying chains, absent the settlement layer. I think in the end users don't necessarily care too much about what chain they're using. And I think that developers also, I'm starting to see increasingly that developers don't necessarily care what chains they're using. And also we see a trend where you have a set of early adopters for, let's say, Ethereum or Solana or Near or name your L1, and you start to see slowing down of their growth of community given the inflection points of the token itself, even, right? And what's happening is that developers are saying, okay, great, there's a new L1 that I can really contribute to, and really see, let's call it that upside. And I think we're going to start to see a continuing movement of people as these communities start to ossify and get a little bit more mature. Also, there's a really interesting tension between kind of generic L1s and app chains, right? Application specific blockchains. For example, I'm seeing a lot of games that start on a generic L1 that start to feel kind of this cost of coordination that I mentioned earlier.
Yep.
I think this is pretty clear with games like Kribata or DeFi Kingdoms, Kribata on Avalanche, DeFi Kingdoms on Harmony, where they cause so much traffic and congestion on these base chains that they were like, hey, look, I need to create a subnet and have this application specific chain, and at some point that tension, whether it's a game or DeFi or really anything else, kind of becomes too weighted on one side, and I think you'll start to see kind of an unbundling. It's debatable whether anything was ever bundled in the first place in this industry, but you'll start to see a peeling off of kind of apps over time, in my opinion. And frankly, I think we'll see as many roll-ups as there are startups today, to be honest.
No, and you said a couple of points that I really do agree with, and that's number one: the consumers are caring less and less. The more we get into that kind of adoption curve of going towards mainstream, the less and less people have any idea. They've heard of Bitcoin, they've heard of Ethereum, they may have heard of one or two others, but I can promise you, as someone that runs a large community and we onboard people that are interested in crypto every day, you'd be shocked how many people may own crypto that have no idea how to self custody or have any idea what the use case is. I think I saw just prior to last month, I saw a note that only 1.5 million Ethereum wallets hold one ETH or more. that's so early. And so, as we
Yep.
kind of get into the mainstream adoption, like, again, I always go back to this Web 1 versus Web 3. Like, we started off with Web 1 with, like, you had to type in the TCP IP address. Like, you had to know where you wanted to go. And there's like some old jokes about, like, literally on the side of my monitor you would have like sticky notes with, like, here's the websites that I like to see, because they hadn't even gotten, DNS wasn't even around. There wasn't any way to resolve this, and forget, dialing into the actual server, which is very similar to what we're seeing today. How do you see, clearly you're trying to solve those issues from a data flow management. Do you see you guys elevating a little bit more to kind of that DNS routing, of kind of apps, overall?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, yeah, I had this conversation with Luis, my co-founder, not too long ago. I was like, "Hey, man, what if we included smart contracts?" And he almost had a conniption asking him that. But no, no, I'm just kidding. But Pocket is solving a very specific problem, and there's actually interesting things that can be done within the kind of generic architecture of Pocket. If you think about it, um, any blockchain that we support is basically an open source database, right? And that can be extended to other types of open source databases. So I can see us moving up the stack into indexing, as an example. So that's another layer of this kind of middleware stack, if you will. That's quite important. That's really critical for when you're seeing historical on-chain data. If you look at charts on Uniswap or anything like that, historical charts, if you're digging through the state trees of the Ethereum database, that will take you a very, very long time to get the full history of, the MakerDAO token, as an example, right?
Yep.
So that's where indexing really comes into play, where it allows you to get this historical information much more quickly and efficiently on a kind of DApp by DApp basis. So Pocket can really support any open source database, indexing included. And extending that, it doesn't have to be anything related to cryptocurrency necessarily. I mean, you could even run machine learning models on a database supported by Pocket, right? As long as every kind of node has, let's say, a consistent interface within a specific, let's say, I don't know, Tesla, you name it, machine learning model, whatever it is, Pocket can actually compute that and serve it, right? So that's kind of on the kind of database side of things. Pocket also, you can think of it as kind of the inverse of an Oracle system, kind of like Chainlink. So what Chainlink does is they take off-chain data, they validate it, and put that on-chain. What Pocket does is take on-chain data, validates it, and sends it to the end user, right?
Yep.
And through the cryptoeconomic security that we've designed within Pocket, it wouldn't be too far-fetched, for example, to maybe deploy some smart contracts, either maybe through layer two on top of Pocket or whatever it might be, and actually have really strong cryptoeconomic incentives for people to provide data for smart contracts on chain. Moving further, outside of that, we have some pretty crazy far out ideas that we think could be possible, but just some stuff that we think we've kind of bantered around. If our Pocket DAO bought a bunch of global data centers around the world, you could have a really interesting intranet and passing around data, that which is quite interesting. And there's some farther out stuff like, for example, trustless swaps, with the cryptoeconomic security and these sorts of things. But we really want to nail the blockchain use case first, and really do a good job there before really kind of moving up the stack.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to always remember, you can build a better mousetrap in Web3 and be insanely successful with it if you get adoption and you have the integration correct. And so a lot of the concepts of your saying that you're throwing out are not new concepts to the Web 1, Web 2, but in Web 3 they're just not built out yet, or somebody tried and quite simply was either too advantageous or just quite simply it was the wrong time. So I'm thrilled to see you getting adoption because this is one of those services that is absolutely necessary for global infrastructure to be able to build. I mean, the chains are fabulous, but even Solana, which run can hit up to about 400,000 TPS before it crashes and has to be rebooted. That's not mainstream by any means. So what you guys are doing by taking any amount of pressure off of those chains, any amount of pressure off those nodes and relaying to it is speeding up and also lowering the gas prices for everyone. So I really, I think that's something that needs to be said is, if you're whining about Ethereum gas prices, is if you didn't have a bunch of the DApps using Pocket, you'd still, I mean, again, it would just continually slow things down, even though it's not an actionable item. To pull those things, it would definitely hurt you.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's so much on the gas prices, more so on removing the load from the teams to have to deal with running the infrastructure. It's kind of
Gotcha.
like allowing Solana, for example, to just focus on fixing the bugs with their chain, or any team to just even ship their blockchain or their layer two. It's really just removing a critical piece of launching a blockchain. And this is why I think that we'll live in a world with as many blockchains as there are startups, because you starting to have specific protocols or teams or products that are gradually kind of peeling back the onion, so that kind of the core team really focuses on shipping, what they're good at, right, or what they've really thought about, right. The problem is that there's a whole bunch of external issues and things that teams really need to focus on to execute launching an entire blockchain, whether it's economic models, infrastructure, indexing, you name it. And Pocket really removes that need, allowing teams to really ship faster and save on costs. To be honest.
Yeah, I listen. It is, and especially right now, any cost savings and any talent savings,
Yes.
because as I'm sure you're very aware, talent is incredibly scarce right now in this Web3 world. How do you guys manage talent acquisition? What's your team makeup like? Are you guys centralized, decentralized? Let's hear a little bit about how you make the magic work.
Yeah, we're about 50 people across 14 countries.
Wow.
My three other co-founders. So I live in Tampa Bay, Florida. Two of them live in Dominican Republic, and the fourth one, she lives in Colombia, in Colombia. And what's ended up happening is that my co-founder Luis, he's managed to recruit. He went to the top engineering school in Dominican Republic, and he's managed to recruit multiple generations of people, either he's worked with or from the university, on part of the engineering side. But in terms of recruiting, it's interesting. Smart people want to work on hard problems, and we are pretty differentiated in terms of being just another DeFi app or NFT app or whatever it might be. And it's actually just through, frankly, our own growth over the last 10 months, it's actually created an incredible inbound in terms of really incredible talent. For example, a good friend of mine, I've known him actually longer than I've known my co-founders. Things worked out, and he went from working at Magic Leap and Waymo to working, at Pocket, as an example, and that's this kind of creates network effects of people wanting to work with other smart people and work on hard problems. So we've actually had a pretty nice. I think for us, the hardest thing to hire for is, frankly, Tendermint engineers. It's a very specific role, and us being a Tendermint blockchain, there's very extremely limited capacity of that specific skill set. But outside of that, it's by being remote first, it's allowed us to really recruit across the world, and being really remote for now, it's going on 6 years building Pocket. It's been in our culture from the very beginning.
So the some of the things that again Web 2 and Web 3 have solved very easily is you can easily coordinate. We can do Zooms. We can talk to teams all day long. You can send money in a flash for payment and whatnot. How are you managing time zones? How are you managing these teams, which again you've got 14 countries, and unless you've got them vertically aligned in North and South America, I'm sure you've got some over in Eurasia. How's that been with kind of trying to deal with a global a global team? Because it's a new thing for me to deal with.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of asynchronous communication, a lot of documentation. I think the biggest challenge we have is having someone on the West Coast on the engineering side, in Vancouver, for example, and working with an infrastructure, one of our infrastructure leads in Paris, for example. So
Oh,
that's the biggest gap that we have. But it's finding those quick meetings that we try to minimize, whether it's daily or weekly. That finding a time that makes sense, and really it's a lot of written communication, a lot of asynchronous coordination, and it's been we've had some growing pains. We recently grew from about 20 people to 50, and over the course of about 4 to 6 months, and we definitely had a few growing pains, but it's more so on the process side of things, more than anything. But um, you know one tip is one thing that we found successful is actually creating a kind of constellation of discords to kind of avoid the noise between each kind of individual team, but then having a kind of single silo discord where everyone kind of meets. So kind of like a hub and spoke model, if you will. We found relatively successful so far.
yeah, I need more Discord servers in my life, so I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
I know, right?
I appreciate that recommendation. So let's talk about, like, for myself. Let's say myself or yWhales, we want to run a node. We like to get one spun up. I've got a server room in my building here. Uh, talk a little bit about kind of the process of what's needed, and even not cost, but how many tokens you'd have to spin up a node.
Yeah, you need 15,000 POKT minimum to run a Pocket node. And what's great is that there are several different options that someone can utilize to actually participate in the network. I'd like to give a shout out to Node Pilot. They've actually allowed hundreds of people at this point to run individual nodes within the network with a very nice GUI or nice user interface, where you just very simply say, hey, you set up your domain, you set up your POKT. They've got great documentation, and you just say, click deploy node. Very easy. If you want to go a little bit more hardcore, if you can make your way around a terminal, there's lots of great documentation. There's also kind of tools that have been built to kind of monitor your infrastructure, all these sorts of things. There's quite a few repositories with great documentation as well for the bold to kind of dive into a terminal. And lastly, we have several node providers as well within the network. So if you'd rather pay a monthly fee, or have them take a percentage of your rewards, for example, you can kind of set it and forget it and use a node provider. But what's really interesting is that like the tooling has kind of lagged a little bit behind our growth in terms, especially of blockchains. So where it was kind of difficult to run a single node, today it's actually quite simple to run a fleet of 50 node pilot nodes, as an example, right? And as we start to add more blockchains, the tooling kind of catches up to what an individual with relatively little, let's say, DevOps terminal, experience can actually run themselves. And that's really nice to see. That's been a really nice development that we've seen over the last 12 to 18 months.
That's awesome. And how many nodes did you say you guys are running right now, or people are running?
Yeah, the network has almost 50,000 nodes
Wow.
across 30 something countries. And that's really why we've been able to be just as fast, if not faster, than centralized services. Because really what causes latency these days is the speed of light. And if I am in Germany and I have to hit the servers that are in Ireland, for example, that's a much longer hop than me hitting, for example, a server that's in Frankfurt, as an example, right? So that distribution has actually allowed us, and the amount of nodes and that the clustering of those nodes around these regions has actually been incredibly beneficial for us.
That's amazing. So you've got a number of things coming down your roadmap here, and I really like the way you guys have a naming convention. Protofish.
Yes, yeah, that's part of that's part of V1. So we're actually completely rebuilding Pocket from scratch. Actually, we just launched the very first fully fledged prototype from end to end of V1 this week, actually,
Oh
yesterday.
wow.
So it's a huge accomplishment from the team. It's something we've been thinking about since last summer, and we released kind of the specs for V1 January this year, and 6 months later, we actually got the full functional prototype, which is very exciting. But the protofish is the previous before the full fisherman, which
Yep.
is kind of part of the new model part of the new model with V1. But really, that's one of the most important things that we're working on today is shipping V1 by next year, hopefully.
And that the new version will include, the governance of starting to work towards a DAO, correct?
Yeah, well, we have actually a fully fledged and operational DAO today.
Okay.
We really view, we've always viewed Pocket. We're not really building a business. We're building more of a country. And what I mean by that is we've avoided, for example, token weighted voting. We in fact have what we call an opt-in democracy. So basically, you prove your kind of quote unquote citizenship within the Pocket ecosystem by running nodes, by being an application, by being active in the community, and through some things that are impossible to automate through bots. And you effectively claim your vote. And we've had up until now, we've had 24 voters, but we've just had a pretty big improvement to the process. And I think we're going to be looking at 50 voters pretty soon. And these are all people that have been in the community, running nodes, building applications for well over a year, if not years, at this point.
That's awesome. Let's talk just briefly about community. To me, that's the most important side. Is you can have a beautiful project, you can have a amazing concept, but if you don't have like people behind it,
Yes.
it falls apart really quick. What's it been like to kind of have to build and nurture that community?
Yeah, let me tell you, this is probably one of the most incredible things, and probably one of the most yeah, it's just absolutely one of the most incredible things that I've seen in almost 2 years of the protocol being live. So, Pocket's a relatively technical project, right? And early on, we had a pretty strong filter for people to come in, meaning just difficulty of running nodes, this sort of thing. So really, only those who are really kind of hardcore about trying to run nodes and seeing the problem started filtering in. And as a result, it's actually created a bit uh, uh, of a foundation for our community. And now we've seen, I mentioned Node Pilot, we've got tons of node providers that have actually raised money on top of Pocket and are extremely active through their businesses, in the forums and in the community and this sort of thing. We've got a group of kids, they're the Thunderhead crew, 13 and 17-year-old that have built so much on top of Pocket. It's an incredible amount. And we've got this entire group of really technical and sophisticated people, really who have built the foundation of where we're at today. And it's kind of being shown because, as I was mentioning about the economics earlier, we never put in any kind of, let's say, Bitcoin type halvings or anything like that. We kind of said, hey, look, we don't know how fast we'll grow, where we'll be at in a year or 2 years. Let's leave that to the DAO and making that decision of when to kind of lower rewards, reduce inflation, whatever it might be. And we've seen one proposal pass back in January, February timeframe that says, hey, we're going to lower everything by 90%. And the fact that we were able to entrust kind of everyone saying collectively, hey, we are going to make less money, is actually one of the things I'm most proud about. And in fact, we have multiple proposals today doing something similar, acknowledging, where the network is today, where we want to be in 3 years. And everyone who are really voting and talking in the forums see this kind of long-term vision, which is just one of the most exciting things, to be honest, for me. So, not to say that things aren't easy. That definitely things get tense at times, and the forums, we have to do some moderation at times. But all in all, it's actually really incredible. I mean, I recommend just taking a look at the forums, just even over the last couple of days or weeks. You'll see the activity. It's actually quite remarkable.
I love that, and there's so much about community to have your back in these projects and really to be engaging in that perspective is just beyond amazing. So All right. So as we kind of head into the final segment here, which is alpha drop, and again, no financial advice. Don't ever listen to anything I have to say. But Michael, you should. And so, what are you seeing? Because you have a very core understanding of blockchain. You have a lot of understanding of where this ecosystem's going. Because not only are you looking at this from a perspective from Pocket, but like you guys need to. I'm sure you're reading every white paper that exists. I'm sure you're looking at a lot of the details. So what's got you excited right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a few things, but if I had to pick one, I'd probably pick Celestia. They're not live yet, but some of the technical innovation and eventually UX innovation, I think if they can pull it off, is just I think pretty game changing. They really are pushing this kind of modular blockchain idea, and what that does is basically, we today, if you look in an Ethereum node, it's a very what we call monolithic client. So everything is kind of within this Ethereum node, and they've managed to come up with this way to basically separate consensus from settlement or other things, which I think will allow further this, as unbiased as possible, this kind of really truly multi blockchain future. And frankly, I'm just, there's some interesting questions about it, but it's one of these things where I view as, we went from Bitcoin to Ethereum, and I think Celestia might actually be kind of that Ethereum to kind of that next level kind of innovation, which I think I'm just incredibly excited for. Again, it's not live yet. A ton of things could go wrong, obviously, but just generally, I'm very excited about the vision.
So real quick, because I don't know anything about these guys. So the first modular blockchain network, and I just want to point out that one of their initial bullet points is deploying a blockchain as easily as a smart contract. That's not a really like comforting statement right there for anyone
Well,
who's
let
deployed a
me.
smart contract. There's a lot of work there. So this is not, like the idea around like the Squarespace of websites is, I think, what they're getting after here. In fact, I think
Yeah,
it's a little different here because it seems like, they want you to scaling made simple, choose your, execution environment. So it really sounds like kind of blockchains to go or blockchain in a box. Like, hey, what do you need for your kind of project or for your company, which I think is again absolutely that's what Polkadot and a bunch of these other ones with the parachains are trying to do. This seems
yeah.
very interesting. Do you know the team or anyone that's been working on
Yeah,
it?
I've met them. I've met them in person a couple times. I've met Nick and Mustafa and chatted with them a few times in the past. But yeah, I think that's a good way to put it in terms of kind of Squarespace for blockchains. We're still a long ways away from that. To be clear, I think they're being very honest with their marketing when they say as easy as deploying a smart contract, which I think is a good thing, frankly, because they are obviously very very early. But nonetheless, there's some interesting features that I think that are enabled uniquely by Celestia. I talked about bridging earlier, and to be able to have you know tens of thousands of Celestia rollups and be able to bridge assets safely across those rollups is actually I don't want to. It's hard to overstate how big of a deal that is. Yeah, sorry.
I say constantly there's two main issues with main adoption that until these are solved, we're never going to get anywhere. Number one is wallets. The wallets and the entire infrastructure around wallets is garbage. Seed keys, unchangeable seed keys,
Yeah.
how hackable and everything are. Like to me, this is it's just
Yes.
useless. I haven't seen a single wallet of which I agree with yet, and I think that people have made some great innovations, but we haven't seen that product. And the two is bridges. To have a chain agnostic, it can't cost you like if you want to move $20 from chain A to chain B, it can't cost you $40 to do it. You need to have a very kind of near gas free layer zero to be able to move your assets around, wrap, unwrap. I mean, there's no reason for people to be wrapping and unwrapping, constantly when there's already the stuff on chain. So I love this idea, and this is a very cool one.
Yeah.
So
To your first
thank
point,
you.
I wonder if social recovery will be kind of that Netscape moment for Web3 more broadly, and for kind of that broad adoption that you mentioned.
I,
One
I,
point.
I actually I think it's TradFi. I think this is
Uh,
where DeFi will meet TradFi, and I think that having, you got to remember there's a gazillion banks around the world that exist today that are going to continue to exist even when we get mainstream crypto adoption. Like anyone that thinks that DeFi is just going to run over and these banks are going to be
yeah,
Taco Bell's the next day is kind of missing a lot of who those customers are. But the
sure.
idea that you can have a fully KYC'd wallet that is hosted by your bank, I absolutely can tell you that I've talked to numerous people that are working on this problem right now. So you can still do the Ethereum wallet that will always be available. You just make one up and do your own thing. But I think for those mainstream people that are concerned about security, concerned about privacy, and they're not here to gamble like the rest of us degens. I think that the wallet system is going to come along, and it could be so there can be social. I think that's the great thing about Web3. It can be
Yeah,
whatever people imagine and wherever adoption is, and what does adoption mean? Like I said, we went back to early in our conversation. There's less than 1.5 million Ethereum wallets with one ETH or more in it today.
yeah,
That's like we're so early. So I absolutely love this, Michael. And again, from circling back to Pocket Network, I think what you guys are doing is absolutely crucial. We have numerous yWhale members that are running nodes right now, and we've talked to them, and they just love the ecosystem. They love kind of the vision that your team and your community continue to put out. So for anyone else that's interested, they want to run a node, they just want to hang out, or they just want to kind of build something. Where's the best way to find you guys?
yeah. You can find me at O_Rourke. It's basically my last name with an underscore instead of an apostrophe. And you can definitely keep up with Pocket at POKT Network on Twitter. And we've got a couple newsletters. I definitely recommend diving into the community. Check out the Poctopus chat, or the Poctopus Den. That was someone who came in and is truly a community leader. And he's actually built an incredible thing there. So there's definitely several avenues. Definitely recommend taking a look at the forums.
So how technical does someone have to be to be involved in Pocket Network? Do they have to like understand code, or can they just say, I just want
No.
to be a fanboy?
Yeah. You don't have to be technical at all to participate or anything like that. That's why we have specific routes for governance when it's community and all sorts of stuff. So
I'd like to also congratulate you on making it through this entire interview without using the word NFT once. That was really an accomplishment, and showcases how focused you are on everything you guys are doing.
No, thank you. This was fantastic, Jay. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Anytime. yWhales, that's Michael with Pocket Network. And really go check them out, understand what they're doing, and huge, crucial aspect to Web3 that we're going to continue to watch over the years. So thank you, Michael.